What is up, kinfolk? How are y'all doing? So this video kept popping up on my feed. It's called Hookup Culture is Bad for Boys Too. I am not a fan of hookup culture. How I was raised is that, marriage is something that's very important, and that when you're dating, you date with intention, not for the sake of just hooking up with just random people. So for me, I've always had the aspect of hookup culture is bad, but I'm curious to see what this young lady's perspective is about hookup culture. So, without further ado, let's get into it.
It is a little bit late, but as promised, I am going to today discuss the effects of hookup culture on men. So oftentimes you probably hear people say things like hookup culture only benefits men, and that's partially true. So hookup culture does predominantly benefit men, but it only really benefits a small minority of men. In fact, some men can't even take part in hookup culture even if they wanted to. And we can see that this is true because there's been a rise in male virginity as the years have gone by. 1 in 3 men are either virgins or have not had sex in the last year. This large number of men who aren't able to find female companionship or female partners is also a big part in why we've seen massive explosions on platforms like OnlyFans, as one of the most popular genres on OnlyFans is known as GFE, which basically stands for the girlfriend experience. Because what's happening is men are basically paying OnlyFans models to act as a substitute for a girlfriend. I don't really know what that consist of, like what kind of content that is, but yeah, they basically are paying these models to pretend to be their girlfriend. Another byproduct of this is the rise in the manosphere. So this is where you'll find your red pill content and your black pill content.
So I get the manosphere, but wow, that's crazy, because you think of OnlyFans, a lot of people get people say why would you pay for OnlyFans when corn is out there and corn is readily available and you don't have to pay for it. But now that makes sense, because in corn, I'm not sure, but you don't get the experience of somebody acting and treating you as if they're your girlfriend. But you can pay for that through OnlyFans. That is interesting. Wow.
And so I might butcher the explanations of these two sides, but from my understanding, red pill is when you are focused more on self-improvement. So they kind of try and help men improve their physique and their game and stuff in order to try and attract women. And then the black pill, from my understanding anyways, it seems as though within the black pill, they believe that appearance is the most important thing within within dating. So they basically put forward the idea that wherever you land on the Chad meter, shall we say, in terms of your appearance is what's going to determine your success in dating. That's my understanding. The red pill's a little bit more optimistic. They think there's still stuff that can be done. Whereas the black pill is kind of like you're born with it or not, kind of. That's the energy I get from the two. But I could be wrong in my interpretation, but from what I've seen, that's the difference between these two pills or whatever. So how did we get here? How did we get into a situation where there's an increase in incels, there's an increase in lonely men paying OnlyFans models to pretend to be their girlfriend, an increase in men paying money for courses to manosphere content creators? Well, the answer to how we got here is, first of all, the sexual revolution, because the sexual revolution detached reproduction from sex and made sex more so about pleasure, and therefore turned it into a leisure activity. Now, this, accompanied with modern inventions such as contraception, helped to destigmatize casual sex. So the sexual revolution, along with contraception, created the perfect foundations for hookup culture. And what caused hookup culture to explode was dating apps. The reason why hookup culture...
So I agree with the contraception argument, because sex in general has a very high risk factor, huge high risk factor, especially when it comes to pregnancy. And pregnancy is the biggest thing that a lot of people didn't want to get, because it comes with certain responsibilities. So people did intentionally wait and save it till later on down the line, specifically in a marriage, because the understanding is at least there you do have some support, you do have some structure in terms of a man bringing in money. We can go into, feminists will bring up, all this about you just want to be barefoot and pregnant. I'm not talking about that. Specifically from the aspect of contraception, if you didn't have it, you're going to be very, very careful and very, very coveting of your virginity, because you did not want to end up in a situation where economically you are incapable of taking care of yourself, let alone another human life. So you would save that, and you would be very, very cautious of it. Now that you don't necessarily have to worry about that. Do women get pregnant these days? Absolutely, for sure. There's always that risk. But even if you mirror having birth control and condoms, you eliminate the possibility of you actually getting pregnant, and it kind of cheapens it to where it's not as special anymore. You can just get it wherever you want to, and you can just do it whenever you want to.
The reason why hookup culture is so prevalent today is because of dating apps. Right now, men are in control of the mating strategy. And I know that there's going to be a lot of men watching this video who are going to say that's not true, this is all because of women, etc., etc. As it stands right now, that small minority of men that are benefiting from hookup culture are the ones who are setting the terms for today's mating strategy. I'll explain to you why men are the ones who are causing hookup culture, but women are enabling it. So there were some studies done on campuses, and what they were comparing was to see the differences between female mating strategy and male mating strategy. So what they found on these campuses was that whichever sex was the minority was the one who got to dictate the mating strategy, because they were the minority and therefore the highest in demand. What they observed on all of these campuses was that if the women were the ones who were the minority, these campuses had higher rates of monogamy, because women's natural dating strategy is to be monogamous. But on the campuses where men were the minority, these campuses had higher rates of hookup culture, because men's natural dating strategy is polygamy, which is when a man has multiple women at once. So the reason why we have higher rates of hookup culture in our regular day-to-day society is because our dating nowadays is predominantly done through dating apps. And the issue with that is that there's only a small minority of men that women actually want within these dating apps.
So, okay, I see her point. When you have a small minority of men, and women may get even to an even smaller minority. They're tall, they have to be over 6 foot, and you have men who know that is an attractive thing. They can dictate the terms of the relationships, or dictate the terms of the dating market, because they know they're in high demand. And when it comes to hookup culture and it comes to dating apps, they say that the majority of men, if you're an average dude, you can kiss dating apps goodbye, because you're going to be overlooked and overshadowed by the guy who looks extremely charismatic, who has a lot of money, who's over 6 foot. If you don't have any of those qualities and you're just a regular dude who works a 9-to-5 job making decent money, you're going to be overlooked by men who have a lot more to offer you in that regard. Which is why the red pill community, I would say, in her point, is a lot more popular, because in that regard, you could always do things to make yourself more attractive. If you're overweight, you can work out. If you don't have money, you can work on ways of getting more money by having a business, having a side hustle. There are things that you can do to put yourself in the minority and make yourself attractive. I think even when it comes to attractiveness for women, some women will even go to a polygamy standpoint, because they recognize that they have, even though they have a monogamous relationship, they understand that they have a pick of the litter. So they will explore, not necessarily sexually, but just even interpersonally with a lot of men before they make the decision for who they want to date. Because if it's just I only have one option, then I only have one option. But I have 20 dudes who are willing and wanting to date me. I have the opportunity to sit back. I could sexually explore each and every one of these men. I could, go on a lot of dates with these men, because they all have interest in me. They're trying to prove to me that they're worthy of my time. They're worthy of all this stuff. The vice versa is when it comes to dudes in polygamy. If you're not trying to get with one person and just be monogamous, and you have a pick of all these women, it's like, shoot, as soon as you start tripping, I got another one willing to take your place.
Which brings me to my next point. Because most women are trying to pursue the same small minority of men, and these men are exploring and enjoying themselves by having multiple women at once, they're not really looking to settle down with any of these women, because why would they when they've got all the options in the world? And so what tends to happen is they'll mess around with these girls and just have casual sex with them, but never commit to them. And these women will eventually want more from them, because as much as the feminists have told us that we can have casual sex just like men can and it's nothing to us, the reality is we are biologically different. The reason why women tend to develop feelings first during these friends with benefit situations is because when women sleep with men, we release a hormone called oxytocin. And this oxytocin is known as a bonding hormone. It causes us to form attachments and bonds with the person that we're sleeping with. And so if you have a friends with benefits situation with a guy, you're releasing this hormone when you sleep together. And so you are developing an attachment to them. And that's the reason why women typically tend to be the ones who develop feelings first during these situationships. And this is usually why a lot of these situationships end, is because the woman wants more, but the guy doesn't, because men don't release oxytocin when they're sleeping with you. Like, men have oxytocin too, but they don't release it in the same way that women do. So this is why it's a lot easier for guys to have casual sex and to sleep with loads of people and never develop feelings or get attached or anything like that. Whereas it's not the same for women because our biology is not the same.
All of these women, because I've heard it said so many times, you want a guy who makes over 100K, who's over 6 foot. So you've brought a minority to a minority to a minority. And these men in these positions understand that, and they know that they're very high valued, right? And I don't have to put in that much work. At the point that you are saying you want a whole bunch of stuff from me, it's like, okay, well, I'll just move on to the next chick who doesn't have those expectations for me, because that's not what I'm looking for. And here's where the issue of hookup culture, I think, does take a bad turn, is because, once again, like she said, 15% of men. The other 85% of men are completely overlooked. And for women to date any of these 85% of men would be dating down. I'm not saying to not be picky, because just because there's 85% of men doesn't mean that they're all viable options either. But you can't just completely overlook them and say that you're dating down because he only makes $50,000 a year or $60,000 a year. And he's not making 100K, and he's under 6 foot. And now you're going to dismiss this guy, even though he may be a really great man who will love and support you in everything that you do, that you guys might actually be able to work together fairly well, and you automatically discount him because he doesn't make all these other things, and you're only looking at 15%. And I think this is also why a lot of women end up single, is because you're only chasing that 15% when you, unlike the men, you're not allowing yourself to have more options in that regard. If you look at the full 100%, you have 100% of men to choose from, as opposed to just the 15%, like she said. And then even smaller and smaller if you start to get into even more categories, such as like finances and job status, all this stuff.
And this has polluted the dating pool, because what will typically happen is a woman will get with one of these top 15% guys who has no intention of settling down yet because he's in his prime, and then she'll develop feelings for him, she'll want a relationship with him, he's not really interested in doing that, so then they go apart. And then the problem is, if she experiences this multiple times, she will eventually develop resentment and bitterness towards men, because she thinks that all men are the same and that all men are trash, and then she will go back out into the world with this new traumatized outlook. And so this is a problem for the other, say, 85% of guys, because they all kind of get lumped in together into this whole men are trash thing, when really it's the men that women are dealing with that are trash, because most women are pursuing the same small minority of men, and they're all being screwed over by that same small minority of men. So the reason why most women think men are trash is because they're all sleeping with the same guys. So far, I do feel like I've only spoken about the...
Preach! Preach! Bless her. Preach! Preach! Oh, my girl is hitting it. She's hitting it. Like, what? Eloquently stated. I can't. Girl, yes. 100%. 100%. Yes. And now the problem with these 85% of dudes, and which I think is also the issue in the manosphere, is why men are saying that women are trash, is because they're also dating these same exact women who have been dating these 15% dudes. So now you're getting with women, or they haven't even been dating these 15% dudes, but they've been getting around their girlfriends, right? So you have a girl who is, maybe she doesn't have the experience of being around this 15%, but she's around girls who are around these dudes who are in that 15%. They're going to slowly but surely, not necessarily manipulate, but they're going to be a scope of how she sees men in her lives. Because every time we're talking like, he's not this, he's not that. So now you end up meeting a guy who's at 85% and it's dating down, or you have this resentment that isn't even your own, it's from your girlfriends, and now this dude has to deal with it. So now he comes and like, man, girls are all materialistic, they're all this, they're all that, they only want one thing, like they expect me to have all this money. He's like, yeah, because the type of girl that you're dating was only dating guys like that. And unless she has an epiphany of her own self and realizes that that isn't necessarily important, money is important, but it's not necessarily that important, you won't be having to deal with these same exact women who are bitter, who are frustrated, and then it turns around. It's just a revolving door. It's recycling at its finest.
So in my last video, I shared a video of a woman who didn't prioritize settling down when she was younger, and she was discussing the struggles of being single and unmarried at 46. And today I'm also going to share a story of a man and his experience in a similar situation. So someone posted on Quora, is it hard to live as a bachelor your whole life? And so this was the top reply, and it was really popular. It got 1.1 million views and 1,000 likes. And so this is what they said. Yes, it sucks, and it sucks more as you get older. Speaking as a single 54-year-old man who has never been married, I can tell you that being alone as you get older is a scary and unpleasant proposition. As you get older, you become more aware and sure of your values and what you want. If you are not careful, you become inflexible and unable to negotiate those values. In the meantime, I see around me people my age who not only have experienced the trials, pain, and joy of child rearing, but are becoming grandparents. For a long time, while they were changing diapers and coaching Little League, I was practicing for triathlons, traveling the world, doing whatever activity struck my fancy, and driving expensive cars. But they were the winners in the long run. Yes, some, perhaps many of them divorced, but they still have their families and children. They experienced the joys of transferring their knowledge and love to another generation of themselves, and they formed intimate bonds with someone special that exceeded mere friendship. I don't regret the good times I had, or the adventures, or the exciting romantic rendezvous, but I think all those things pale in comparison to sharing consistent, cohesive moments with someone you build a future with and plan to grow old with. In addition, the silence of being alone is deafening. You can fill your hours with activities, reading, volunteering, and more, but coming home to an empty house and wondering who will find you if you die alone in the middle of the night, and who will even care, is one of the most pathetic fears of an aging bachelor's life. I still live in hope that somewhere out there is the love of my life, waiting to be discovered somehow, but it's with increasing fear and doubt that this hope is threatened. So those are the confessions of someone who chose the life of being a bachelor.
Oh God, that sounds terrible. And yet, I'm gonna flip it from that, because she's talking about from a male's perspective. Let's take it to the ladies that tell you that being single is what it's all about, and that, you know, no one could tell me what to do and I could do anything I want when I want to. That's the reality for these women too. You're the cool auntie that all, you know, your friends send all their kids to, but now you're older, you know, you have nobody. If you have siblings, maybe they're still around. Your parents might be gone. God forbid you're only child, but you literally have nobody. Like, you could literally die and nobody would know. They didn't have anybody there. Or, like, you know, maybe you're having a medical condition and something happens and, like, there's nobody around. You have nobody to share the great moments with. I mean, you have friends and stuff like that, but eventually, like she said, if they have family, they're going to eventually prioritize them over you. So who do you have left? That's a sad life. And the sad part is that feminism and women are telling younger women that this is what a life is all about and what it's supposed to be. And this is what it's going to be like for a lot of these women who can't settle down or won't settle down or whatever. That's sad, man. That's really sad. To her point, I think there's a lot of issues when it comes to hookup culture, and there's a lot of things that we have to change. It will require a lot of work. I think it can be done, but I think some of the people who are going to have to make the biggest move are going to be women. We have a lot of bitter women who are teaching younger women to be better, teaching them to only go for this 15%. We don't look at stuff like, you know, are they a really decent man? Or are they, you know, can you guys work well together? If there's any issue that arises, can you guys be able to problem solve that together? I think there are a lot of ways you can go about it, but it really comes back to just going back to the things that actually matter.